One night, I had a dream about the famous motivational speaker, Tony Robbins. When I woke up from my dream, I thought to myself, what a strange dream. And then suddenly I remembered, right before going to bed, an app on my phone gave me a free sample for one of his books. And so I decided to start the sample. Now here's my question for all of you. Do you think these two events were connected? One, I started the sample before going to bed, and two, I had a dream about Tony Robbins that same night. I think most people would say, yes, those two events are connected. So what does that tell us about what we're putting into our minds? The theme of today's conference is the gaze. What would you say that most teenagers are gazing at these days? You might say, oh, cell phones, screens, right? Did you know that teens are on their phone for 7 hours every day? That's a statistic from Fabio Duarte. He's a research associate for Exploding Topics. So today I'm here to suggest to you that what you gaze at, what you watch, will impact your life. And if you want to change your life, you can start by changing your gaze. I'll take up 3 points today. And the 3 points will be these. First, I'll tell you how the mind works. And then after I tell you how the mind works, then I'll show you the two main inputs that we gaze at that go into our mind. And then finally, I'll give you some suggestions or some ideas on how to manage your gaze. So first, how does the mind work? Well, in simple terms, the mind works like a garden. The Chinese people have a saying, 种瓜得瓜, 种豆得豆. It literally means if you plant melons, you're going to get melons. And if you plant beans, you're going to get beans. And we learn that this principle works in every area of our life. Whether it's school, our relationships, whether you're learning to play the guitar or learning a new language, whatever you plant is what you're going to harvest. Now, let's imagine that your mind is full of anxiety. Some of you don't have to imagine that because your mind is full of anxiety, right? But look, the goal is peace of mind. The goal is peace of mind. Now, as you begin to think about what you've been gazing at over the last week, you analyze it and you notice that most of your gazing has just been a big waste of time. Some of you, you've gazed at things that are negative, which subconsciously affects your mood, right? And adds even more anxiety. And then some of you, you were gazing at things that were shameful, meaning that you wouldn't want anybody to know that you were gazing at some of those things. The famous author and speaker, Zig Ziglar, said this. He said, the person who puts garbage into your mind does far more harm than the person that would put garbage there on your living room floor. So here's my question to all of you. Can you get peace of mind from garbage? Remember, that was our goal, peace of mind. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who was an inspirational religious leader in the 1950s, who wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. And here's what he said. He said, to have a mind full of peace, merely fill it full of peace. It's as simple as that. So your mind works like a garden. And what you plant is what you're going to harvest. You will never get a different result. If you plant an apple, you can never get an orange. So now I'm going to take up the second part, which is the input that we put into our mind. There are two main kinds of input. And rather than just call them negative input and positive input, I've named them. So the first one we're going to look at is called the impulse buy, and the second one is the grocery list. Let's start with the impulse buy. Now, the impulse buy input, it works just like the impulse buy in a grocery store. You walk in, you weren't planning on buying anything, but then right by the register when you're checking out, something looked enticing and you bought it, right? This kind of input is quick, it's mindless, it's addictive, and it almost always has no nutritional value for us. More specifically, this input could be things like scrolling social media or endlessly watching those short videos. Or maybe it's, the clickbait. Or it could possibly be gaming up until late hours of the night, or even just grabbing your phone because you're bored. Now, imagine this, okay? I want to try to reason with you using a food analogy, all right? Imagine you ate a whole pizza. And when you eat that pizza, at first, you're going to feel this emotional boost. You're going to feel pretty good for a few minutes. But after the boost will come a crash. Fatigue, mental fog, low motivation. So you have a decision to make because the crash lasts much longer than the boost. You have a decision to make whether is it worth it to have those few minutes of spike or boost just to get that longer crash. And our gazing is similar. It's not different. Those short videos, they feel good for a little bit, but the boost is short-lived. The crash lasts much longer. So that's the impulse buy. And that is what a lot of teens these days are doing. Now on to the second kind of input, which is the grocery list. Now, why does a person make a grocery list? Well, they do it to stay focused. Because in the store, there are a lot of distractions. They've got specific items on that list, and they know what they're looking for. This kind of input, it's wholesome, it's thought out, it's pre-decided, and it's usually productive. It might specifically be things like this, like TED Talks. It could be podcasts, documentaries, and of course books. Could be live theater, ballet. The point is, whatever it is, you choose to gaze at it. We could make this intentional gazing. Imagine this. You just ate a big meal. Maybe it was that pizza that you had earlier. And now it's time for dessert. So you've got two options. You can choose the chocolate cake, or you can choose the apple. Now, when I opt for the apple, I never regret it. I never say to myself, I regret that apple. I should have taken the 500 calories instead. And the same goes for our gazing. I never regret it. I never say to myself, you know what? I regret that nonfiction book about how to make more money. And so there are two types of input, the impulse buy and the grocery list. Now, next I want to take up the third part, which is about how do you choose good input. And it's going to revolve around this word replacing. So I want to highlight that word replacing. I've learned that in life, a lot of things are binary, meaning you can have A or B, but you can't have both. For example, you can't ride two bicycles, unless maybe you're in the circus. If you go to the movie theater, right, you can't choose two movies to watch at the same time. You've got a decision to make as to what you're going to watch. Tom Ziglar, who is the CEO of Ziglar Inc., which is an organization or a company that specializes in personal development and sales coaching. He said this: the fastest way to success is to replace bad habits with good ones. What would it look like for you if you replace some of your bad gazing habits with good gazing habits? Now you might be thinking, okay, how many of those 7 hours that I mentioned earlier, okay, how many of those 7 hours should I replace? Well, that's a good question. And here's how I would answer it. How much freedom and control do you want over your life? How much peace of mind do you want? How much success do you want? Because how you answer those questions are how many hours that you should replace. So replacing is important. Okay? Now, I'm going to teach you 2 questions that you can ask yourself whenever you are gazing. And these will help you. The first question is this. Is what I'm gazing at getting me closer to or farther from my goals? Imagine you have a goal to get a 4.0 on your next report card. Whenever you're gazing, you should ask yourself this. Is this gazing getting me closer to or farther from that 4.0? Because the successful people that you look up to in your life, they're reaching their goals by asking this same question, whether directly or indirectly. The second question you can use is this one. This content that I'm gazing at, did I choose it or did it choose me? We've all had this experience on our cell phone, right? Where we go to the phone or we go to the screen for something in particular, and then we end up gazing at things or watching things we haven't planned to, right? Managing your gaze, learning to manage your gaze is a soft skill. They don't have courses on how to manage your smartphone. But learning this soft skill or failure to learn it has huge consequences for your future. So one more thing about replacing is this. Whatever you feed will grow, and whatever you starve will die. And this not only works with your plants at home, it also works with our gazing. If you put in that mindless content, you're going to starve the good stuff. But if you will feed the good stuff, then you will starve out that mindless content. So today, I've taken up 3 points today to help you. So let's review. The first one, your mind works like a garden, and what you plant you harvest. The second one was the 2 kinds of input, and rather than just say negative and positive, I gave you a metaphor for them. The impulse buy and the grocery list. And then finally, I gave you 2 questions to help you when you're gazing, which are, is this gazing getting me closer to or farther from my goals? And then the second one was, this gazing, did I choose it or did it choose me? I'd like to finish with a story. This story was originally a Cherokee parable about 2 wolves, but today there are many variations of this story. I like a version that's similar to the way Zig Ziglar, the guy I mentioned earlier, and Billy Graham told the story. Now I want to first, before I tell the story, just tell everybody or remind you it's a parable. There will be a dog fight in the story. So it's not a true story, it's a parable. But it goes like this. There was an Alaskan fisherman who had 2 dogs. One named Siku and the other named Ulu. And every weekend he would bring the dogs to the city center and the 2 dogs would fight. And people would come around and they would bet. They would place bets on which dog they thought would win. And sometimes Siku would win, and other times Ulu would win. So if you were always betting on Siku over the years, you might win half the time. But there was one guy who never lost a bet. And his name, or the person that was the Alaskan fisherman, the owner of the 2 dogs. Years later, he was asked, how did you always know which dog was going to win? And here's what he said. I always bet on the dog that I had been feeding that week. You see, he had been feeding one dog and starving the other one. So he always knew which dog was going to be stronger in the fight. What about about you. Which input will win out in your life? Will it be the impulse buy? Or will it be the grocery list? Because I'm betting on the input that you feed yourself. I'm betting on the input that you gaze at the most. Thank you.